In a quiet corner of Indiana, a factory hums with precision. Steel meets spark, and children's bicycles are welded into existence. One every 30 seconds. This is not China. This is Seymour. And this is Guardian Bikes, a company quietly defying the logic of 4 decades of globalization. The facility spans 540,000 square feet. Each week, 12,000 bicycles roll off its automated assembly line. The process is streamlined, the machinery is tuned, and the output is measurable. What is harder to quantify, however, is the geopolitical significance of what this factory represents. It is easy to forget that in the late 1970s, over 20% of Americans were employed in manufacturing.
But the logic is strategic.
Nearly 20 million people.
A factory does not operate
It was
in
not
isolation.
simply an economic model. It was a national identity.
Production facility
That
often
era,
attracts
however,
input suppliers
is gone.
nearby.
By
Welding
2023,
services, raw
the
materials,
number of U.S.
and machining
manufacturing jobs
expertise.
had dropped to
Over
12.7
time,
million.
this local supply
Entire
web can
industrial
rebuild itself,
ecosystems
but
collapsed,
the cost is time and
outsourced
commitment.
across oceans.
Many are not ready
Now,
to pay that cost.
some are asking,
Recent closures
can American
of US-based
manufacturing come
solar
back?
panel factories
Is there a
underscore this.
future in reshoring?
Meyer Burger,
Or are
a firm
efforts like
once
Guardian
hailed as part
Bikes
of a green tech
merely
revival,
symbolic?
shut down its
Hopeful
Arizona
gestures against an
operations,
irreversible
citing an
tide?
inability
Guardian's
to compete
journey
with
did not
low-cost
begin in
Asian
Seymour.
imports.
It began,
It is a familiar
like
pattern.
many American startups,
Without tariffs,
with a narrow
subsidies, or
specialization,
consumer
a safety
loyalty,
break innovation
price wins.
in 2013.
And
But over
foreign
time,
producers dominate.
the founders realized something.
Still,
To
the
control
political mood
quality,
is changing.
to control the
President
customer
Donald
experience,
Trump has called
and
for
to
a
stabilize
manufacturing
operations.
renaissance.
They
His
would need to
policies
control
have
production.
focused on
In the
reshoring,
early years,
on trade
they relied on
renegotiation,
Chinese original
and on
equipment
incentivizing
manufacturers.
American-made goods.
Container ships would carry fully
Supporters
assembled
argue that
bicycles
even if
across the
manufacturing
Pacific,
jobs do not
arriving
return
at West
en
Coast
masse,
ports,
the
then
factories
dispersed through
themselves
U.S.
still matter.
distribution centers.
They are anchors
It
of
was
strategic
efficient in theory,
independence.
but fragile
Critics
in
point
practice.
to automation. They
Shipping
argue that
times
jobs
ran
were
6
lost
to 8
not
months.
to China,
Inventory
but to
projections were guesswork.
and that reviving
And when global
factories
trade
does not
slowed or
necessarily
container costs
revive
soared,
employment.
operations
But
were
this argument
paralyzed.
misses the point.
Brian Riley,
It is not
the
about
chief
numbers
executive
alone.
officer,
It is about
understood
control,
that a
about
product's value
sovereignty,
is not
and
just
about
its
resilience
cost.
in the face
It is
of
its
a fragmented
availability,
global order.
its adaptability,
Global supply
and its
chains are no
consistency.
longer invulnerable.
So Guardian
The
shifted
pandemic
course.
proved that.
They took a
The
risk.
war in Ukraine proved
They opened
that.
a plant in the
The
United
tensions in the
States.
Taiwan Strait
With full
continue to
knowledge that
prove
labor
that.
costs would be higher,
Dependence on overseas
component sourcing would be
manufacturing is no
difficult,
longer
and
just an
automation would
economic
be essential.
liability.
It was a
It is a
calculated
national
gamble
security concern.
rooted in long-term
Companies like
strategic
Guardian
thinking.
are preparing for
Inside
this
the
new
Seymour
world.
plant,
They are
production
not
is
waiting for
optimized.
incentives. They are
Welding
not
a bike
waiting for
frame takes
perfect
just 3
conditions.
minutes.
They are building
Components
now.
like hubs
Their model
are
may
produced
not
in
be
bursts,
scalable across all
hundreds
sectors,
of thousands over months.
but it is instructive.
Workers are few,
It shows what is possible
skilled.
when vision is paired with
Many of them
execution.
formerly employed at
When
regional
policy
automotive
creates
factories.
space, and when
Automation
leadership
offsets
fills it.
cost.
Today,
Speed offsets
service
inventory
jobs
pressure.
account for over
Proximity
80%
offsets
of non-farm
uncertainty.
employment in the
But the deeper
United
challenge
States.
is not efficiency. It is
Manufacturing
supply
is a
chains.
smaller piece
For
of
decades,
the puzzle,
the United
remains
States allowed
vital,
its manufacturing
not for volume,
inputs to evaporate.
but for value.
Rims,
In a world
chains,
where logistics can
gears,
fail,
and tubes,
where ports
once
can close,
domestically sourced,
and where allies
now
can
come
waver,
almost
the
exclusively from
ability
Asia.
to build at home
There are
is
no
more than
shortcuts
economic
to reversing
strategy.
this.
It is
Guardian has
geopolitical
had to
necessity.
persuade companies that do
Guardian
not make
Bikes
bike
may be a
parts
small company,
to start
but it
making
offers
bike
a large
parts.
lesson.
It is
The
not
American
replication.
factory is not
It is
extinct.
reinvention.
It is evolving,
Here,
one bike at a time.
geopolitics enters. Tariffs imposed in 2018 and 2019 and reinforced in 2022 and beyond have altered the economic equation. What was once unquestionably cheaper in China is now sometimes cheaper at home. Price parity has emerged. In some cases, domestic parts now undercut Chinese imports. The implications are clear. Trade policy is not just a lever of economics, it is a lever of sovereignty. But policy is uneven. While China has directed hundreds of billions into industrial planning, tax incentives, and training, the United States has remained fragmented. The CHIPS Act of 2022 directed $39 billion towards semiconductor production, but bicycle frames, textiles, and industrial components remain neglected. Without a holistic strategy, progress will be slow. Meanwhile, China's model continues to evolve. In 2019 alone, Beijing spent $248 billion on industrial policy. Their workers are trained, their factories are cutting edge, environmental controls are minimal, and wages remain drastically lower, around $4 per hour in China and $1.3 in Vietnam, compared to $35 in the United States. This cost delta defines the playing field. Guardian Bikes navigates this by maximizing automation and minimizing inventory waste. Their components are increasingly sourced locally from Columbus, Indiana, or within a 45-minute radius. They believe 70% of their bike can be domestically sourced by the end of 2025, and fully 100% by 2026. That is ambitious, but the logic is strategic. A factory does not operate in isolation. It depends on an ecosystem. The presence of a production facility often attracts input suppliers, nearby welding services, raw materials, and machining expertise. Over time, this local supply web can rebuild itself, but the cost is time and commitment. Many are not ready to pay that cost. Recent closures of US-based solar panel factories underscore this. Meyerberger, a firm once hailed as part of a green tech revival, shut down its Arizona operations, citing an inability to compete with low-cost Asian imports. It is a familiar pattern. Without tariffs, subsidies, or consumer loyalty, price wins, and foreign producers dominate. Still, the political mood is changing. President Donald Trump has called for a manufacturing renaissance. His policies have focused on reshoring, on trade renegotiation, and on incentivizing American-made goods. Supporters argue that even if manufacturing jobs do not return en masse, the factories themselves still matter. They are anchors of strategic independence. Critics point to automation. They argue that jobs were lost not to China, but to machines, and that reviving factories does not necessarily revive employment. But this argument misses the point. It is not about numbers alone. It is about control, about sovereignty, and about resilience in the face of a fragmented global order. Global supply chains are no longer invulnerable. The pandemic proved that. The war in Ukraine proved that. The tensions in the Taiwan Strait continue to prove that. Dependence on overseas manufacturing is no longer just an economic liability. It is a national security concern. Companies like Guardian are preparing for this new world. They are not waiting for incentives. They are not waiting for perfect conditions. They are building now. Their model may not be scalable across all sectors, but it is instructive. It shows what is possible when vision is paired with execution, when policy creates space, and when leadership fills it. Today, service jobs account for over 80% of non-farm employment in the United States. Manufacturing is a smaller piece of the puzzle, but it remains vital not for volume, but for value. In a world where logistics can fail, where ports can close, and where allies can waver, the ability to build at home is more than economic strategy. It is geopolitical necessity. Guardian Bikes may be a small company, but it offers a large lesson. The American factory is not extinct. It is evolving, one bike at a time.